Welcome to the Lion's Den podcast series. Our name is inspired by the biblical story of Daniel in the lion's den, where Daniel's faith in God saved him from the lions, reflecting our goal of navigating life's challenges with faith in God. Daniel's journey, a story of trust and perseverance, holds a special place in my heart. As Daniel Scrivner, son of New Hope Olympia's founding pastor, Del Scrivner, I feel a deep personal connection to this story, and I'm excited to share its lessons with you. In our podcast, which blends personal reflections, guest interviews, and biblical teachings, we'll tackle everyday issues that can overwhelm us without God's help. Thank you for joining us. Your support means a lot, and we hope our episodes bless you.
Well, hello again, friends. My name is Daniel, son of New Hope founding pastor Del Scrivner, and this is the Lion's Den podcast, the New Hope on the Go podcast, and this podcast is for New Year's Day, Wednesday, January 1st, and you can see this podcast via video at our YouTube channel, and of course you can hear it on any Alexa device, I think Spotify, and a few other different audio devices as well. So it's, again, is our endeavor to release this, our mission, I should say, to release this every Wednesday. The goal of this podcast is to offer hope. Sometimes we will have guest interviews. Sometimes it'll be a mix of this and that. Today, because it's the new year, I wanted to turn our attention to a new type of vision. What is your vision? What is my vision as we look forward? So many people draw up New Year's resolutions each and every year, and as is the tradition going back many years, if you've been around a little while like I have, you know that those New Year's resolutions only last a day or two, sometimes a week, at most a month. They often deal with our health, or we're going to get back in shape. They deal with our diet. They deal with new resolutions as far as wealth or other things. And often on the other side of those resolutions, those desires to fulfill those resolutions, I should say, is the end goal that brings some sort of happiness, some sort of fulfillment. And people look for fulfillment, as we've alluded to, as I've alluded to before in previous podcasts. They'll look for fulfillment in their wealth. They'll look for fulfillment in their status. They'll look for fulfillment in their job, the day-to-day grind of their job. They'll look for fulfillment in hobbies. They'll look for fulfillment in relationships and finding their quote-unquote soulmate. Some people will go person to person to person looking for someone to fill that gap that they have. And so it's always in search of something. And so our vision is often turned forward, not liking where we're at, perhaps, or wanting something new in order to feel some sort of fulfillment. And so my attention this week was drawn towards an old movie, older to some of you probably. I grew up with it, and it's a movie entitled Field of Dreams. This came out in 1989. The character's name is Ray, and his wife and his daughter, they live on this farm. I believe it's in Iowa. And it deals with the Chicago Black Sox, and it deals with shoeless Joe Jackson. It's just a very interesting, fun to watch, imaginative movie. This guy raises corn. His father has passed away. He never really knew his father, and he and his father had a strained relationship. How many of us can relate with that? And he's out in his field one day, and he has this vision of this long, huge field of corn being turned into a baseball field. And if you know the movie, obviously you know what happens next is he creates this baseball field because he hears this voice that says, if you build it, he will come. And throughout this movie, there's this journey of who is the he. He goes on a journey himself into finding historical characters, historical people that impact his life along the way. And it culminates at the end of the film as they're staring at this field. Those that believe it have been along with him on this ride and see it. They see a baseball field. They see former players that have I come from what some might call some sort of heaven. It's sort of strange how this occurs, but they see these old players from the Chicago Black Sox and even other teams playing baseball, and they're sitting on this bench and they're watching it. And then Ray's brother-in-law comes along and says, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, you are wasting your time, you are wasting your money, there is nothing to see here. You created a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield. There is nothing here. You've wasted and created enormous debt for yourself and for your family and for my sister. He says, sell the farm to me, Ray, essentially. And Ray's counterpart, his buddy that he has become friends with, says, don't sell the field. People will come and they'll buy tickets and they'll come to watch baseball. And it's an entertaining movie, and it's entitled Field of Dreams. And it's this idea that the character saw the potential and the historical value and a culmination of everything we look for in life buried in that field. Well, Jesus in Matthew chapter 13 drew kind of a similar parallel. I should say Jesus' words came first, didn't they? But it's Matthew chapter 13, verse 44, and take a look at this. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all he had, and he bought that field. And that's from Matthew 13, verse 44. And so he bought this field. We in life, and I've done this myself, and I'm just going to give you a personal version of this story. So in 2020, as the pandemic hit, we were on the tail end of a lot of crises in our family. My daughter, Reese, who was 14 months at the time, in April of 2017, she had this tumor that was, of course, cancerous, and it led to months of treatment and months of fear and anxiety and coming to the sort of feeling at the end of our rope, so to speak, just overwhelmed. I'm not even wording this right. It was so chaotic and traumatic for our family, the things that we went through. So we went through that in 2017. My daughter received a complete. My daughter completed her cancer treatment that year, and we are thankful that she's still cancer-free. My wife on September 17th of that year had cardiac arrest while my daughter was in treatment. And so 2017 was just a hard, stressful, scary year. I'd like to go into those stories at another time. But we came through those storms, and then 2020 hit. I, of course, had been home since I had left work due to my MS. And so 2020 hit, and people were staying at home, and I was starting to watch, as everyone else was, I was starting to watch old programs. I came across the old painter on TV from the 1980s, whom you probably remember as Bob Ross, had the big afro hair that, by the way, he never liked. He always wanted to change. But it's interesting is that he was in love, and you can tell he was in love with painting. And I grew up watching these painting shows. And after a while, you continue to hear, hey, you should try this. And because 2020 was an awful year, and we were all stuck at home, and we were used to being stuck at home with having to guard my daughter's health, and so isolation and being isolated myself after I left work with my MS, it just was something we were already familiar with. And so when the pandemic came, it was just another layer. And so I came across this painter, this artist, Bob Ross, and I started watching him, and I decided to give it a try. And I bought a Bob Ross starter kit, and I went out and I found this little cheap easel from one of the fabric stores, and I bought a cheap canvas and some cheap cleaner, and I set out my little area on the front porch outside so as not to cause chaos. And my painting looked like chaos. And I'll never forget, I looked at that painting and I thought, that is not easy. This is just, I don't know why I did this. I think I might quit this. And so you can see a picture of it up on the screen, but this is my first painting from May of 2020. My wife encouraged me to try it again. I did. And it slowly became a hobby, is that I started to invest in this thing, and it became an interest and a passion, and I started painting more frequently. And a few years go by, and a few more paintings, and it becomes something that maybe I can make this more than a hobby. I don't know. But this year it turned into something. I have a website. I have painting, art, wall art for sale. It turned into, wall art and cups, mugs and different things. And it's like, is this really happening? And it was a gift that God gave me. In 2014, about 6 months or so after I was home, I started having a strong interest in piano music and playing piano. And of course, I grew up listening to George Winston, and I loved listening to George Winston, one of my favorite pianists. And George Winston plays by ear. He does not read sheet music. And whatever the condition is with my MS is that I cannot retain when I study often. And so sheet music was just not an option. And so my neighbor, because he knew I had this interest in piano, he went out and bought me a keyboard, I think from Goodwill. And it was God driven, these gifts of this gift of piano music. And I would start to play by ear, and I started to record. And over the years, I've recorded a few things, and then it turned into, these are gifts that, I'm talking fast and going over a sort of a long period of time to say this, is that these gifts, and they're not from me, these gifts of piano and art, these gifts that God gave me with music and with painting, I started to make them viable, to make the art portion of it viable, to make it successful, to make it work. And it became something that was no longer really fun or enjoyable. It became stressful. I was trying to make something that came as a gift, and that when people came across it, they wanted. And I would start to see some success in people wanting different, images of my art that I have, wall art or other. But it turned from spending time with the one who gave me that gift to focusing wholly on that gift, and it led to burnout. And I started examining this lately, is that the one who is the source of it all, the source of your fulfillment, the source of my the source of my fulfillment, if I can say that right, gives us these gifts, and we all have them. Some people have the gift of writing. Some people have the gift of speech. Some people have the gift of compassion. God has bestowed on you gifts, and it does, even if you don't have a relationship with Him, because God is love. God loves. He bestows on people gifts, and people, you hear it in their voice when they sing. We can easily say they really have a what? Gift. And sometimes we get so focused on pursuing the gifts that God gives us that it leads to burnout, because He is not the one that we are pursuing. To look at this another way is that we become sidetracked in our attention span. We become sidetracked in the things around us. It's really super easy to distract us, isn't it? And we become sidetracked in the busyness of our day. Do you remember that portion of Scripture where the disciples are hanging out with Jesus, and Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead? Like, everyone has seen this man be raised from the dead. Everyone has seen Jesus turn water into wine. Everyone has seen Him. There's stories about Him everywhere. This carpenter's son, healing the sick, raising the dead, healing the blind, healing the mute, going to the leper, the least, the lost, the last, hanging out with the outcast, being labeled a friend of sinners. And so His disciples are sitting with Him at Mary and Martha's house, and Mary is just just drawn to his words and just soaking everything in. And Martha is trying to accommodate the people that are in the house. And she's worried and she's focused on a lot of different things, not just cleaning, but she snaps at God. She snaps at Jesus and says, Lord, essentially, why don't you tell my sister to help me? Don't just let her sit there. Why don't you care, essentially, that I'm doing this by myself? And Jesus made it a point, and through all the 2,000 years of history, for us to still see how important this is as we manage our day. And that's what this is about, is having new vision. It's looking at our year differently and turning our eyes from the gifts that God gives us, from the distractions, from the things that we obsess over, from the things that we look for in fulfillment, and turning to Him as Mary did, and sitting at His feet and letting Him order our day. And Jesus would tell Martha, just like He tells me often, I feel He has told me often, and probably has told you as well, is that you are worried about many things. You're stressed out about your day. You're stressed out about your finances. You're stressed out about your child. Maybe they're far off. Maybe they're being disrespectful and dishonoring. Maybe they're making terrible life choices, this one over here. Maybe it's not about your children. Maybe you lost a child and you're grieving. It doesn't matter what age they pass. Is it you've been grieving? Is it you feel stuck and are stuck because you're not pursuing the plans that God has for you? Is that our eyes get off of Him and either onto distractions like money as a source of fulfillment, or we're stuck with a hurt that we can't get over. We're stuck with a habit that we can't get over, or our days are just so busy. We go to the next thing, that even in the morning when we wake up, even if we want to start the day with God, if that's where our mind is that we're jumping from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And we feel like we're running inside. Even if we're walking, we just feel out of breath. Everything is now, and to the point that by the time we finally hit our head on our pillow, our mind is fixated on what's happening tomorrow. Is that we can't get that rest. And Jesus is telling you, and He's telling me, you are troubled and you are worried about many things, but one thing is needful. And then He made a contrast. He said, Mary chose the right way, chose the good part, and it will not be taken from her. Jesus is telling us is that we can ask Him to order our day. There's only one thing, friend, that you and that I need to do, is that we need to go to that treasure in a field. We need to go to the source of that treasure. This is a picture, this man who digs up this treasure, puts it back and goes out and he buys this field. It's coming to a realization that, Jesus, He's the treasure. He's the one. He's the source of all fulfillment that we've been looking for our whole lives. He's the reason that we get up and that we hurry and that we rush. Some people go and they buy all these lottery tickets. I read a story or saw a news, just an article just a couple days ago. This lottery was like 1.2 billion, this historic win. And yet you see time and time and time again, all these winners winning the lottery over a period of years. It's not that many years later that they come to financial or total ruin. Is that the source of fulfillment is not there. Solomon was called the richest person that ever lived. He was known as the wisest person that ever lived. He had all the relationships that people often want. I want this person and this person and this person. Yet in all of these things, there is nothing that was deprived from him. But in all of those things, all of those treasures that people spend all their lives seeking, he found empty. That our treasure in a field, the one that we sell our field for, is Him. That's what Mary saw. She looked up into the eyes of Him and saw the compassion and the love and the forgiveness and the fellowship and all her needs met in this one. It was Him all along. It's Him. It's Jesus. He is the source of our treasure. So in 2025, as we put our eyes forward with new vision for this year, our resolution, if we're going to use that term, let's put our eyes where Mary's was. Is that one thing, only one thing is needful. And Mary chose the good part. And we can too. So our treasure in a field, just like that movie, Field of Dreams, where he sells all he has to buy this field and gets ridiculed. Yeah, people will ridicule you if you put Jesus first in your life. You know, I have never heard, I'm 48 years old. In my 48 years of living, and I haven't lived forever, and nor have I been all over the place, I don't know everything. There's a lot I don't know, but I do know a few things. As my dad would say, I've been around the block a few times. I've heard Jesus's and God's name blasphemed ever since I was little, from all types of people, all walks of life, in all types of circumstances. I think I've even heard it in church. But you know what I've never heard blasphemed? I have never heard the name of another person, prophet, anyone else in all of history treated as the right religion, the right person to worship, the right one to worship. I've never heard, the only one I have ever heard blasphemed is our God, is our Lord, is Jesus. Why is that, friend? Because he is the King and the Lord of Lords. And Mary was looking up at him because he is the source of all things. There's a song, it's Your Breath in My Lungs. And it's just so good. Google that. It's his breath in our lungs. And it causes us to, when we wake up in the morning, just that my heart beats because of him. I breathe because of him. That I move and I walk, and in him I have my purpose and my being. So if I'm pursuing just the gifts that he gives me, I'm going to burn out, be exhausted, and be unhappy. Where if I pursue him, Jesus said, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things that we seek will be added unto us as well. Jesus is saying that one thing, just do one thing. So in this new year, here's the challenge: to do one thing, that your day need not be hurried. That you don't, when your cell phone dings, you don't need to pick it up. The phone does not own you. The social media does not own you. The only one thing is needed. Jesus in his ministry was never late. He went from person to person to person, healing with purpose, but never in a hurry, never running. And when he was told that Lazarus was sick and not doing well, he decided to stay a few more days just to make a point. He was never late. And so if we're focused on him, if it's his breath, he's the maker of all things, in our lungs, if he's the treasure in your field, and he is, then it makes sense to hang out and spend time and walk with that treasure, our treasure, each and every day. Well, friends, it's been an honor and a privilege speaking once again in this Lion's Den podcast. And you know, this podcast is available at our YouTube channel. As I said, it's also available on Spotify, Alexa, Apple, other devices as well. At our YouTube channel, Olympia, New Hope Olympia, our YouTube channel, New Hope Olympia, you'll see a wealth of other messages that are available to you as well. We have weekly messages. We have messages going back to 2020 that are just will offer you hope and encouragement. And of course, we have our weekly messages that come out every Saturday night. My father delivers his message once in a while. Once in a great while, I'll fill in for him. But primarily, I'm focused on the Lion's Den podcast. And then this podcast, as you know, is named after Daniel in the Bible. Of course, my name is Daniel Scrivner. My parents named me Daniel. And those lions represent all the things that we go through in life, the bankruptcies, the lost relationship, the strife within families, the health crisis that comes, the stresses, And it's being, I mean, we are in that lion's den in a sense, are we not? All the time, day in and day out, the different things that we face. And so it's my hope, it's our hope that this channel brings you encouragement and brings you hope. And if you are looking for prayer, you can email us and ask for prayer. We do pray over every request that comes in. And I encourage you to do that as well. newhopeolympia@gmail.com. Until next week, friends, have a good week. God bless you and God bless your family.
New Hope Olympia podcasts, including the In the Lion's Den series, are available on all major platforms, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Buzzsprout. This allows you to tune in any time. Our goal is to strengthen our spiritual connection with listeners by offering a variety of topics. With over 100 million monthly listeners, podcasts provide convenient access to knowledge on subjects from science to spirituality. Join us on this journey and discover content that interests you. To view the complete collection of media offerings from New Hope Olympia, please visit our YouTube channel at New Hope Olympia. Should you have any questions, comments, or requests regarding New Hope on the Go podcasts, please email us at newhopeonthego@gmail.com.